this video, I'm going to be showing you the process of one of the most detailed drawings I've ever done. I've been working on this for nearly a month now. It's driving me insane, but I'm getting there. So be sure to stick around to the end to see how it turned out. I've also got a creepypasta I'm going to be narrating for you guys. It's not exactly related to the drawing that I did, but I think it's a really cool story, so I wanted to do a really cool artwork to go along with it and spend a lot of time on it. And that's exactly what I did. This drawing just snowballed out of control with the detail. You'll see it. I don't know why I did this, but I hope you guys enjoy how it turns out. Also, before I go and get onto the story, the video I did a couple weeks back, colouring in this bad boy. Got some illustrations in there. Basically, I said in that video, if you guys get it to 5,000 likes, I'll colour in this whole book for one video. And you guys got it past 5,000 likes. I was kind of hoping you wouldn't. So, I'm going to be doing this in an upcoming video. There's a bunch of illustrations. I think there's 14 more illustrations I've got to finish. So that's going to be a really fun video. Alright guys, let's jump into the story. I hope you enjoy. Be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. The doorway to the dead dimension. My name is William Bill Owens III, and in this journal I publish stories of those who have encountered supernatural, paranormal, bizarre, and otherwise unexplainable phenomena, benevolent or malevolent, or benign, and who feel they can't turn anywhere else but need to be listened to. You may do with this information what you will. Tales from the Shadows, Issue 1, Dave Bakowski and the Underground Doorway to the Dead Dimension. Tap 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 tap. Dave Bakowski is rapping a light beat on the floor with his foot. It's a nervous tick, as he'll explain, and throughout the course of this conversation, save for 2 occasions where he excused himself briefly, that tick will cease only a single time. To calm himself, he smokes too, and once he's got his cigarette, he lifts the pack and produces one for me. I decline. Then I set the recording device and place it on the table next to my chair and turn it on. You know what's a fact, he says. What is? Started smoking the same day the foot jitter started. He places the cigarette between his teeth and lights it up after a failed attempt and puffs on it and coughs. Ain't that something? Same damn day. That have something to do with why I'm here? He nods a bit. Ain't no doubt about that. I write this down, and without looking up, say, So you were an outdoorsman, right? Yes, sir. Never was one for cities. Closer I can get to nature, the closer I am to God. Why I chose to live out this way. From there a rolling hill can be seen, on which his house is built, and at the bottom of this slope it is consumed by woods, and surrounded, some miles off, by the eastern Appalachians, although those can hardly be seen from the living room. He takes a long drag on his cigarette. Started hiking when I was, 17, 18 maybe? Late high school years, somewhere around there. Loved it too. Started climbing after that, and diving. Wish I could still get out there and do all that stuff. But you know how it goes. The march of time. He nods. The march of time. Yes, sir. Throughout all of this, I notice, but do not mention the fact that his foot jitter has subsided. The talk of nature calms him. The next topic will not. And in our phone calls, you said it was caving, right? I think I'm quoting you as saying that it was your final frontier. The jitter resumes. Tap, 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 tap. Yup. I was around 27, 28. Realized I didn't just like the outdoors for the sake of it. I liked the thrill too, you know. Not danger really, but He trails off and swirls his hand in the air while he struggles to find the wording. The adrenaline rush? He snaps his fingers. The adrenaline rush, yes. The excitement. A little danger, I guess. He laughs. I smile. So how experienced were you when it happened? Intermediate. I'd been doing splunking for a year or two at the time, give or take. Mostly in big safe places, you know. Carlsbad, Natural Bridge, places folks go to a lot. Realized the novelty wore off after a while. It was fun still, but not thrilling. Bingo! Can't be properly thrilling if it's been done before, way I see it anyway. He takes another drag that finishes that cigarette, and without hesitation, produces and lights, and starts a second. By the time our talk is concluded, he'll have finished what was left of that pack. You thirsty? He says. Got some Bakowski's brew in the fridge. You brew your own beer? Keeps me busy. He doesn't wait for my response. He gets up with the cigarette in his teeth and moves into the kitchen. And a moment later, he is back with 2 glasses filled with a thick stout. I take a sip and hold in a retch and place it down. He downs a third of his glass in a single gulp, trying to get the local farmers market to sell this stuff, but there's all sorts of licensing shit I gotta work on through. I steer the conversation back to the matter at hand. So you said it can't be thrilling if it's been done. So I'm guessing you started exploring caves that were not so well known. Tap, 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 tap. Few of them were named. Most weren't. Means I, and whoever was with me, got to name 'em, which was a neat privilege. Usually just combined our names to make it easy. Bakowski Adams, Bakowski Baldwin Francis Pucker. Most of them were small things too. Little 1, 2 chamber holes in the mountainside, tall enough to crouch in, maybe deep enough to lose sunlight, but not much bigger than that. There is a pause before he adds, but then there was Baldwin Bakowski, and his foot jitter begins again, and with speed. Tap, 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 tap. When he takes another sip of his beer, this causes him to spill a bit on his shirt. He dabs lazily at the stain. Under his breath he mumbles, "Hell." Baldwin Bakowski, I say. That one on a map? He shakes his head, no. And I hope it stays that way. So how did you find it? My guide was a caving vet named John Baldwin. Met up with him on a previous hike, and he tells me about this place he found all on his lonesome. Said he hadn't had a chance to explore the place yet, at least not past the second chamber or so, and invites me. And let me tell you this, a place that's both unexplored and worth exploring. That's a rare combination indeed. So I jumped at the chance. We get there. We park a good mile and a half out, give or take. March up the mountain slope, and there it is. Just a little humble hole between two trees. Had to squeeze our way in. No wonder it went under the radar, for as long as it did, anyway. So in we go, and like most of the places I've been in up to that point, it was really damn small. You know, we had to crouch in there, and for a minute I thought I got myself conned, or something. Like, why the hell did you bring me here? There ain't nothing special about this. To avoid looking rude, I forced myself to swallow a third of my beer. That ready for prime time, you think? What's that? The drink. You think I could sell it? Yeah, it's really good. Really strong. After a pause, I say, so the cave was small. Well, yeah, at first. But that's when he turns on his flashlight and points over to the northwestern side of the cave, roundabouts. And there's a little gap there, a little cut in the rock that you could shimmy through. So he gets to work doing that. Starts calling out stuff he sees, you know. Bend your knee around this rock, gotta duck a bit, twist your arm to get past this, stuff like that. And before I get inside, I'm thinking, hey man, you know I like splunking for the quiet and adrenaline, the exploring, but I don't like tight spaces. No, sir. If anything, I like nature because it's opposite of tight spaces. Wild, free air. Claustrophobias for high-rises. You'd never run into any tight caves? Well, I had, but like I said, the ones that weren't well mapped out, where I knew what I was getting into, were so damn small, you know. And even if there was a little squeezing required, or crawling or something, you could usually see the other side, and usually that was it. But this was just blackness in there. Didn't know how far back it all went. He finishes his beer and wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. But I'd already come that far, you know, so I sucked it up. And I go in, and I'm working real damn hard not to panic, you know, slow my breathing, trying to stay nice and relaxed. And he's calling out obstacles, and I'm doing what he's saying, getting through it just fine. Figure hell, I did that. Had to squeeze and duck and twist, but I got through. Can't get much worse. Might as well keep going at that point. He nods and finishes his second cigarette and dumps its ashes in an overflowing tray. Then lights his third. Went on like that for a while. Place really was bigger than anywhere else I'd been that hadn't been mapped out. Longer at least. Not so much tall or wide, but it kept going and going. Started losing track of time. Lost track of how far we were. When you're working that hard, and boy, it's hard work, let me tell you. Stuff like that just gets away from you. So when did things start to go wrong? His foot jitter picks up its pace again. Tap, 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 tap. We found a pond. Eventually, we get to a little precipice, overlooks a big drop-off, Over to the side of that is a small pond. Ain't no life in it that I can see. Might not even have been deep enough to dive in, but I fill up my bottle at the pond before we start the descent, and I drink it. But then John yells at me not to, tries to wrestle it out of my hands. I'm confused and struggle back, and down he goes. Into the pond. Over the precipice. God. Yeah. There's a beat of silence while he collects his thoughts. Then he says, nasty fall too. Big slab he was standing on, weren't as stable as it looked. It cracks, it slides. He goes down. Then I try to lean over to see if I can help him back up. And I go down too, along with the rest of the rock. How did you survive? Ain't sure. I was pretty damned banged up, I'll tell you that much. He bites his cigarette and half turns in his seat and lifts his shirt to reveal a jagged scar that runs nearly the full length of his side. You see that? He says. Cracked 3 ribs, later found out. Had to wear one of them corset things for a few months. Felt like a real man in that. He starts to chuckle. But then I say, what happened to John? And his laughter dies, and he lowers his shirt. Couldn't find him. He flicks ash into the tray. Dunno how long I was out. But when I came to, he was nowhere to be found. Had to dig out of the rubble myself. Called out to him, searched for him in the mess, to see if he was buried. Nothing. Which meant he had wandered off without me. So I'd been really pissed off on top of every other damn thing. So did you look for him? At this point, I didn't give a damn what happened to the man. I just wanted to find a way out. He begins a fresh cigarette, his 4th by my count, and says, so I just wandered off into the cave. Didn't know where I was going. Didn't know if there was even another exit, But it's not like there was any way out from where I was. So off I went. Walked for, God, I don't know how long. Hours and hours easily. Can't imagine you were equipped for that. Had 2 granola bars. Ate those. Had a bit of trail mix. Ate that. Finished my water. Did find another pond to fill it in. Luckily, the place opened up after that though. Tight corridors became hallways. Little rooms you couldn't stand in without banging your head were now chambers. That you could hear your echo in. But I couldn't find John for the life of me. At least, not before things started getting weird. In what way? He relights his cigarette and gives me a smug side look as he does it. Then he says, found writing. I blink. You saw writing? Is that what you said? Yes, sir. In English? He shakes his head, no. Wasn't any language I could identify. It looked old, ancient even. Almost like those, Egyptian cuneiform things. Like hieroglyphs. What? Egyptians wrote in hieroglyphs, picture words. Cuneiform was Sumerian. Well, whatever it was bizarre. Somehow, and this is gonna sound insane, I didn't know what the writing said, like in a translatable way, but I got the gist of it. And I don't know how. Don't make any sense at all. What was the gist? All at once he becomes visibly distressed. He fidgets and adjusts himself in his seat. Then he says, "It wasn't specific. Wasn't like it was describing death or mayhem or anything. It was like... Here, I'll put it this way. You know when you're a kid and you're afraid of the dark, but you don't know why? You see that, like an open closet at night, or look down in the basement from the top of the stairs or something. You're 6 or 8 years old. What do? You picture the boogeyman. Right, but why? I shrug. I would imagine because the brain wants to put a face on whatever it doesn't know. So it fills in the blank with possibilities that reflect your emotional state. Tries to justify the fear. Good. Now, get rid of all of that. You strip away the zombie. Strip away that vampire. You know, the boogeyman. And what do you have? What's left behind in it all? Naked contextlessness. Faceless dread, I guess. He snaps his fingers and leans back in his seat. Exactly. I didn't read those words. Hell, I didn't even look at them directly. But when I was running through that cave, it was like they were just putting exactly that shit in my brain somehow. Like it cut out the middleman, you know? Took out the reading. Took out me interpreting the words. Took out the idea behind the words. They were just words, covering the floor, the walls, the ceiling, all of it. And then that shit in my head. How do you put it? Naked dread. I nod. Like it quantified death or fear, and found a way to invoke that in you without you having to read it. That's fascinating. Fascinating to hear about, maybe. Being there, it'll drive you mad. I'll tell you what, he says. At that point, it was less about escaping the cave, you know, and more about escaping the words. It was torture, Bill. Truly, it was. Mental torture. Psychological torture. Spiritual, whatever you want to call it. I'd have much rather died alone, starved to death, or suffocated in some godforsaken corner of that damn cave, than have to keep on enduring it. It was getting worse as I went too. How so, exactly? He pats out the ash. Cave got darker as I went in. Don't know how. Ain't like there'd been sunlight for as many hours or days as it's been. But still, darker and darker. Flashlight was less and less effective. I thought the batteries were dying, so I fumbled around and swapped them out with the reserve pair. But it didn't help. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, you know. That kind of dark. Gets right in there with your bones. It's intimate. And the words, I don't know. I got more and more aware of them. And what they were putting in here. He taps his temple with his right hand. Then other shit started happening. He clears his throat, and this rolls into a whooping cough. He puts it out with a swig of beer, then says, I started leaving the cave. I don't follow. I was in the cave and it got darker, and then, even though I could still feel the walls of the cave, the rocks, the floor, you know, I started seeing other stuff, like layered on top of it, like another dimension, Can't explain it any more than the words, but that's the feeling I got. Like I was in the cave, but part of me was somewhere else. What did this new place look like? Like a hallway, smooth surfaces, smooth walls, smooth floor. And I know it weren't part of the cave, 'cause if there's one thing you learn spending your life outdoors, is that nature don't make right angles, you know? And if by some act of God it does, it sure as hell don't make multiple ones right next to each other. No, this place was man-built, or something built. After a drag of his cigarette, he adds, nonchalantly, as if it were a minor detail. And there were pictures on the walls. Really? Yes, sir. Of? He sets the cigarette in his teeth and says, it was the cuneiform from before, but hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphs, whatever. But they were alive. Moving, writhing, squirming. It felt like somehow they had depth to them. And I realized that, you know, whatever it was, this new plane, this new dimension, it was much realer in existence than the one we're in now. Everything was so much more deep, so much more real. Everything here, you know. He picks up his empty glass and turns it over in his hands without purpose. It's like it was just a thin summary of that plane. Somehow, I'd stumbled on through. I guess you'd call it the veil. And I was in the real world. The one behind the illusion. I don't know. Did this more real version of the hieroglyphs provide you any insight into their nature? Any deeper understanding beyond an emotional response? Sure, they did. That dread started getting its own context, a little bit. Something that's still alien, you know, but it started feeling more focused. And the further down the hallway I went, the more focused it got. He put the glass down and stared at it for a bit, lost in thought and his own wordless musings. Then he said, anyway, finally got to the end of the hallway. Words were behind me. Guess they'd served their purpose, or whatever. And at the end, there was a staircase. Massive, mighty flight of stairs stretched out to the left and right as far as I could see. Stretched down so far, there wasn't nothing but blackness there. Don't know what was at the bottom. Don't know if anything was at the bottom, really. But I saw what was in the middle of that place. After an extended pause, in which he assembles the words to produce, and during which the tap-tap-tapping of his foot gets faster, he says, it was a creature, a demon or something, maybe worse, and oh God, it was. It was this mighty massive thing, size of a planet it felt like, just watching me from the mist, from the shadows, and I couldn't get away from it. I couldn't run. I couldn't turn around. No matter where in the cave I was, every single damn step I took brought me closer to it. Realized that I was still in the cave. No matter where I ran in that place, it had no effect on where I was in this real world. Like some kind of, like a computer game character, You can move around in the fake world all you want, but you ain't never gonna leave the living room. What did it look like? The creature, I mean. Tap, 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 tap. Didn't look like anything that's ever been alive here, I'll tell you that much. It was, God, it was almost like a reptile, Maybe a little bit. Just a vaguely reptile thing. Vaguely deer-like, too. And shaped like a jellyfish. Almost. Since it didn't have, a head, or arms, or anything you'd recognize as a body part. It was just this hideous mass, bigger than the moon, and covered in rot, and what looked like tree bark and bones. I thought I saw old, like rock formations, dangling from it too. He gestures to his chin and to his arms, as if something is hanging from them. Stalactites and stalagmites, all that stuff you heard in school. Dangling pillars of rock were a part of this thing. Or an extension of it, I don't know. But it was old, ancient. Not like Roman ancient, but truly otherworldly. Before time itself, kind of ancient. He pauses for a bit to collect himself. Then he says, Then it spoke to me, Bill. The demon spoke to you? He puts his head in his hands and rocks back and forth and trembles. This time, his whole body joins in, and he nods. It spoke the same language as the words, and I couldn't translate it for you if I tried. Human language, I don't know. It ain't better or worse, it's just different. We explain this world, the fake world, Like we got a World Cup, beer, TV. He nods at his television. But the language explains, I don't know, the essence, the deep, the true, naked reality behind the veil. And somehow, I just knew what it meant when it spoke. What did it mean? A tear rolled down his cheek, and he groaned pitifully. It was calling me, Bill. It wasn't saying my name, but it was calling me. The me behind the skin. The me behind the flesh, behind the bones. Oh, God. It was like 1,000 dead voices at once, just singing in this rolling, echoey, gravelly, dead language. And then I was with it, next to it, part of it. I looked behind me, and I saw the stairway way off, Like as far away as the sun is from the earth. Don't know how long it took me to get there. Don't know if time or space even had any meaning in this place at all. I was just getting closer to it, and somehow, for some reason, I didn't care. I wasn't scared, wasn't upset, or happy, or anything. I was me, but without the flesh or emotions. Everything was stripped away. I was just a floating naked soul. What happened when you reached it? started coming back a bit, weirdly. Started feeling things like, this ain't right. Something's wrong. This ain't real. It can't be. Yada yada. Started as just a little trickle of normal thoughts, Like I was still in there somewhere, fighting to get out. And I started to resist. And it pulls me in closer, and I fight some more. By now, David is staring off, in nowhere in particular at all. He is every inch as thoroughly wrapped up in the tale as I am. Then it says something like blood, or sacrifice, or something. That's the closest English word for what it meant. Maybe it was all of the same thing in that language. I don't know. But I got the impression I could only escape if I gave it life. If you gave it life, like allow it to kill you, or that, or some other life. There is a brief pause before he adds, and I realize that, that's what this thing was. This place wasn't the reality behind the illusion at all, but the opposite of reality. And this thing is the opposite of life. That's the only way I can describe it. The opposite of life. The thing on the other side. And only after realizing that, and fighting it like hell, did it start to lose its grip on me. And the cave started to come back, and the light, and, oh God. He breaks down, but manages. I didn't mean to do it. I didn't know. I didn't know, oh God, no. I sit up straight. What? Do what? After a moment, he holds up his trembling hands, as if he hasn't washed them in all these years of the stains of blood. It was John, he says. It was. He'd been calling me and I couldn't. I didn't know. I didn't. John was the demon? He shakes his head. No. When I came out of that damned place, I was back up by the pond. And John was. He was dead. Beaten into the ground. Dead. Broken nose, broken, bruised, disemboweled. And my hands hurt, and I knew. I just knew. It hadn't been hours or days or weeks or however long. We hadn't even fallen over the edge, like I thought. It had been no time at all. John had been saying, No, don't drink that. Don't drink that water here. You don't know what's in it. And he grabbed my arm, and I beat him to death, Bill. I killed him. David begins weeping again, heavily. He drops the cigarette and grabs his head and bunches up his hair between his fingers and rocks back and forth. No. I'm sorry. I didn't. Only after a long time has passed does he sigh loudly and sit back. Then he wipes his nose with the back of his hand and grabs the pack and dumps the last cigarette from it into the palm of his hand. This comforts him to a small degree, and he lights it. I say, "I'm sorry, David." "Yeah, well, what's done is done, right?" His voice is shaking, but he takes a long drag and produces a cloud that fills the air above his head and lifts away. He pats the ash into the bowl. "Took John's keys after that," he says. "Brought a rock down on his head, tossed him over the edge. Found my way out eventually, Drove to the gas station, got a pack, drove home, called the police, and smoked the whole damn thing while I waited for him. Thought I was going to prison, But when they got there, I told him John died in a caving accident. Tripped and fell right over the edge. Weren't nothing I could do. And they saw I wasn't in no shape to be a killer. So they let me be. Left me there to stew in my damn misery and filth." He looks at the floor. I don't know. Don't know if they ever did find him down there. Spent, God, better part of a year, maybe more, worrying someone would find my handprints on his neck and I'd be getting a knock on the door. But I never did get that knock. And by the time I was able to sleep normally again, live well enough with the nightmares, all the stress had produced this here foot jitter. He nods down. Tap, 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 tap. And it ain't ever left me since. That's some 20 years back this May. I consider all of this for a time, and finish my beer while we sit in silence. Then I say, "So do you think it was the pond water that did it? Introduced a hallucination, made you attack John?" He snorts. "Thought about that," he says. "But how did I get the broken ribs?" So it wasn't an illusion at all, then. Maybe not. I do have to ask, though. I get the impression you've bottled this up for a while. Why tell me now? "Because I'm almost out of time," he says. "Like you said earlier, the march of time. Thought I'd get it off my chest before I go into the deep." I blink. "You think you're going back to that place?" "Hell, Bill. Been seeing that place real vivid like in my dreams lately, He pats the last ash into the bowl and laces together his fingers and places his hands across his stomach. "Fact of the matter is, it's where we all go at the end, to join our bones with the pit."